Okay, it's time to look at our French press review, and for that I'm joined by William Hildebrand. Syria, of course, is continuing to dominate the press today, and it's a busy week in Washington, isn't it?
That's right. The French press is playing up this idea with all the Shakespearean drama we could ask for. I'd like to begin by looking at Le Figaro, and it says there's a Hamlet residing in the White House, and his name is Barack Obama. The paper says Obama has long been a realist, but sounds more like an idealist lately, speaking about morality and responsibility. The Figaro piece says his argument to intervene will greatly influence his presidency as Congress weighs a question whether to strike or not to strike.
Well, as voices against this intervention grow louder, it seems that it's creating a sort of hot seat for politicians.
That's right, Aurora. It's interesting how outspoken the United States and France were, but now they've recently begun to backpedal, seeking support from Parliament or trying to find support from European members. So in Le Croix, the French Catholic daily, it headlines "Pressure for Strikes in Syria." An editorial inside the paper says despite Washington's ramped up diplomatic efforts, the public anger against interventions only growing. The Poise also points out what we've heard a lot about in the media lately about war wariness, and says that the public it's learned lessons from the Iraq war. So politicians only have their challenge is going to be that much harder to convince them to engage in Syria.
So there's a lot of reaction against this, this potential war, including from the Pope.
Yes, that's right. Well, what we see is that the Vatican has already written a letter to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Pope Francis is trying to build support for a pacifist solution, much the way we saw with John Paul II in 2003 with the Iraq war looming. But bishops here in France have kept out of the debate and refrained from criticizing the French government and its aims about engaging in Syria.
Okay, Will, let's move on from this Syrian conflict, because here in France, something else is making the headlines, and it's the pensions reform.
That's right. It's always a touchy issue. And the government has defended its plans to overhaul the system, but this comes as a new poll says 81% of the French public is worried about their retirement. 69% are worried that the new measures are going in the wrong direction. What are these changes? Well, one is that everyone will have to pay in for a longer period of time. Officially, this isn't raising the retirement age, but if you're paying for a longer amount of time, it's likely you're going to be older. But this is part of the government's efforts to close a massive budget gap forecast to be 20 billion euros by 2020. But nonetheless, several unions are calling for protests that would begin tomorrow. And
in other news, there's also the mayoral race in Marseille.
That's right. So incumbent Jean-Claude Gaudin is ahead in polling. He's from the Conservative Party, the UMP. And he leads with about 40%, but the socialists trail with 38%. But what's really raising a lot of people's eyebrows is that the far-right National Front is polling at 22%. They've accused the government of failing to address security in Marseille. Over the past 2 years, there have been dozens of drug murders. And as polls near, who can fight the crime best is likely who will win the polls.
William Hildebrand, thank you very much for flying through the papers this morning for France 24. That was the French Press Review. Coming up is Focus. A controversial wall has been built in Slovakia, apparently to separate Roma people from the rest of the population. Authorities say it's for security reasons, but gypsy communities and the European Commission say it's an act of racism.
There's no doubt in her mind as to the race.